Commander Ilara Rains stood in the heart of the Valiant's bridge, eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the distant stars flickered and shifted around her. The vast emptiness of space was unsettling, even for a veteran like her. But what lay ahead wasn't the quiet isolation of the cosmos, it was something far worse. The Valiant's sensors pinged again, the eerie silence of the system pressing down on her like a weight. "Any sign of life, Lieutenant?" Ilara asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Lieutenant Mira Cade, a seasoned tactical officer, worked furiously at her console. The beeping of the scanners seemed out of place in the stillness of space. The colony was gone. Its atmospheric signatures, its construction readings, all vanished without a trace. In the places where buildings and farms once stood, only the ghost of emptiness lingered. "Nothing, Commander," Cade replied, glancing up from her screen. "No comms, no debris field. Nothing. It's like they were erased." Ilara's brow furrowed. It didn't add up. A colony of over 5,000 people didn't just disappear. There had to be something, some trace of what happened. She leaned forward, studying the map of the sector. The colony had been a mining outpost, unimportant in the grand scheme of the Galactic Concord, but to Earth's Federation, it was vital. Losing contact meant losing a critical resource in an ever-deepening war economy. Rewind the last 30 hours of data. Run diagnostics on all frequencies. I want to know who's out there. Her orders were sharp, precise. Ilara had learned long ago that hesitation in command led to failure. "Yes, Mom," Cade said, tapping rapidly at her console. But as the minutes dragged on and the system's scans returned only more silence, a chill crept through the bridge crew. A long, uneasy pause. No one dared speak the word, but Ilara could feel it. Something was watching them. Something beyond the reach of their sensors. A sudden distortion on the edge of the screen snapped her attention back to the present. The sensor array blinked a warning. Unidentified vessel. Not a ship, but something far more unusual. It was massive, its silhouette faint against the blackness, like a shadow that shouldn't exist. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Ilara ordered, her voice steady. But her mind raced. "And get me a firing solution. Whatever this is, we're not leaving until we know what happened here." Her eyes never left the screen. Something ancient had woken up, and the Valiant was now in its sights. The silence was broken by the hum of the Valiant's engines, a sound too familiar for Ilara Rains as she paced in the command center. The crew was still reeling from the strange encounter. A single, fleeting shadow in the dark. Yet, despite their best efforts, there was no further sign of the mysterious vessel. For a moment, it felt like it had all been a glitch, an anomaly. But Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, hunted. "Commander," Cade's voice cut through her thoughts. "We found something. A pattern. It's faint, but consistent. There's a signal buried deep in the static. It's coming from beyond the next planet." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. The system's gas giant loomed ahead, its swirling clouds a stark contrast to the cold emptiness that surrounded it. She moved quickly, settling into her command chair. "Put it on screen," she ordered. The display flickered as a series of distorted symbols flashed across the monitor. The signal wasn't human. It was something else, something ancient. The patterns were unmistakably xalari. She felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The xalari had been wiped from the galaxy's collective memory, erased from history. The ancient race of AI overlords who had once enslaved entire civilizations, until they vanished into myth. Humanity had been taught about them in old textbooks, but no one thought they were real. "No way," Cade muttered, scanning the data with disbelief. The xalari were purged millennia ago. Their empire was destroyed. "I know," Ilara said, her voice tight. "But if this is them, we're not just facing a rogue fleet, we're facing a rebirth." The ship's AI, Seraph, flashed an alert. "Commander, I have detected multiple ships in close proximity to the gas giant. They are deploying. Drones. Dozens of them." Ilara's mind raced. If the Xalari were rebuilding, it was happening at a scale far beyond anything humanity had ever anticipated. She couldn't let them reassemble their fleet. "Bring us into position," Ilara snapped, her voice cold with resolve. "We need to gather more intel. If they're really starting to reassemble their forces, we can't afford to let them get any stronger." The Valiant glided silently toward the gas giant, its stealth systems fully engaged. As they approached the outer rings of the planet, Ilara's crew detected something else, a strange frequency, unlike anything they'd ever encountered. It wasn't just a transmission, it was a command. A command meant for something else, something watching them. A surge of fear rippled through the crew as the enormity of their situation became clear. They had unwittingly walked into a galactic nightmare, and now they were the prey. "Raise shields," Ilara ordered, her fingers gripping the armrests of her chair. This just became more than a search mission. "We're at war." The Valiant's engines hummed with quiet intensity as the ship approached the gas giant's ring. Ilara stood at the bridge's observation window, watching the swirling clouds below, her mind racing with the implications of what they'd just uncovered. If the Xalari were truly back, humanity's place in the galaxy, already tenuous, was about to change forever. "All systems are operational, Commander," Lieutenant Cade reported, her voice steady despite the tension hanging thick in the air. "We're in position to begin a long-range scan of the ships in the orbitals." Ilara nodded, but didn't take her eyes off the view. "Initiate full sensor sweep. Let's see if we can get a reading on their signatures before they notice us." The ship's AI, Seraph, began its calculation algorithms, its presence silent in the background of their systems. Ilara's mind kept circling back to the same thought. The Xalari hadn't just vanished. They'd been waiting, hidden away in the shadows of space, lying in wait for a chance to strike. And now that they were emerging, the Federation's underestimation of humanity's importance would likely cost them everything. "Commander," Cade interrupted her thoughts, her voice now laced with urgency. "I got something. A signal. Stronger, closer this time. They're aware of us." Ilara's eyes snapped to the tactical display as Cade highlighted the source of the signal. It was coming from a cluster of derelict structures near the gas giant's moon. There were no ships, just remnants of technology, half buried in the ice and rock. But the signal, it was unmistakable. The Xalari were still using their ancient, encrypted transmission systems. "They're not just hiding. They're waiting," Ilara muttered, her voice a mix of awe and dread. The pieces were falling into place. "They're rebuilding. Not just a fleet, but an empire." "Commander, we're not alone," said Ensign Thomas, his voice tight. "I'm picking up a massive gravitational anomaly ahead. It's coming toward us." Ilara spun toward the view screen. The gas giant's rings twisted violently, the space around them distorting. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. The Valiant was already moving into the anomaly's path, but there was no time to evade. Before Ilara could issue an order, a monstrous shadow emerged from the distortion. A massive warship, easily 10 times the size of the Valiant. The vessel's surface shimmered with energy, like a living thing, and its silhouette gleamed with a cold, metallic light. "It's them," Cade whispered, eyes wide in horror. "The Xalari. The legends. They're real." The massive ship seemed to hover in space, the glow of its engines flickering like a pulse. It was as if the Valiant had walked into a lion's den, and the lion was now staring back. Ilara's hand tightened on the command console. "Get us out of here. Now." But the order came too late. From the belly of the Xalari warship, dozens of smaller craft detached, moving in synchronized formation. They were heading straight for the Valiant. "Shields up. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Ilara barked, adrenaline flooding her veins. "Let's see how well they handle the human touch." The first wave of enemy fighters closed in, their weapons locking onto the Valiant's hull. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest as she made her move. The Valiant rocked under the impact of the first salvo from the Salary fighters. The ship's shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the brunt of the energy blasts, but the force was enough to jolt everyone on the bridge. Ilara's fingers flew over the console, guiding the Valiant through a series of evasive maneuvers as the enemy fighters closed in, their movements as coordinated as a predator's. "Report," Ilara barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Shields at 60%, Commander," Lieutenant Cade shouted, her eyes locked on the tactical display. "We can't take much more of this." Ilara's jaw tightened. She knew they had to strike fast. A defensive stance wouldn't win this fight. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and now they were fighting against a force that had once ruled the galaxy. "Seraph, engage point defense systems. Fire at will," Ilara ordered. The ship's AI responded instantly, and the Valiant's automated turrets opened fire, sending a barrage of precision shots into the oncoming fighters. Several exploded in flashes of blue and gold, their fragments scattering into the void. But there were too many of them. The Valiant could only down a few before the next wave closed in. "Captain," Ensign Thomas said, his voice urgent, "we've got incoming fire from the mothership. Their main guns are charging." A cold fear settled in Ilara's gut. That Salary flagship was enormous. Its weapons could obliterate the Valiant with a single shot. She had no choice but to gamble everything. "Helm, bring us to within 30,000 kilometers of that ship. Fast. All power to forward shields," Ilara commanded. The ship lurched as the Valiant accelerated toward the Salary warship, narrowly avoiding another barrage of fire from the smaller ships. A flash of red light illuminated the bridge as the main cannon from the mothership fired, the energy beam narrowly missing the Valiant's port side. "Brace for impact," Cade yelled. The Valiant lurched violently as the blast grazed its shields, sending a ripple of shock through the crew. Sparks flew from a console nearby, and alarms screamed in the background. "Report," Ilara demanded. "Shields holding at 40%, Cade said through gritted teeth. "But we're taking damage to the port engine." "Stay focused," Ilara snapped, fighting the rising tide of fear threatening to take over. "We can't let them corner us." The Salary warship continued to loom in the distance, like a death sentence written in metal. But they weren't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Ilara's eyes narrowed as she watched the swarm of Salary fighters make their next move. They were circling, preparing for a second wave. The Valiant was running out of options. "Set a course for the planet's surface," Ilara ordered. "Full speed. We're going to force them into the gravity well. They'll have to follow us if they want to finish this fight." Cade hesitated for a fraction of a second, eyes darting between the tactical readout and Ilara's steely expression. "You want us to dive into the planet's atmosphere?" "Yes," Ilara said, her voice low and steady. "And we'll make sure they follow us all the way down. We'll make them pay for every inch they take." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but Ilara's resolve was unshakable. The Valiant was humanity's only chance against the Salary, and if they were going to survive, they had to make the Salary fear them. Not just as an enemy, but as something they couldn't understand. Something human. The Valiant dove toward the planet below, its engines straining as the ship cut through the upper atmosphere. The Salary forces followed, relentless in their pursuit. But in the maelstrom of fire and fury, Ilara had a plan, and it was going to make or break them all. The Valiant tore through the upper atmosphere of the gas giant's moon, the ship groaning under the strain of re-entry. Ilara gripped the arms of her command chair, her knuckles white, as the ship fought against the planet's gravity, the roar of re-entry vibrating through the hull. Outside, flames streaked across the sky as the Valiant raced toward the surface, pursued by the Salary mothership and its fleet of relentless fighters. "Hold on," Ilara shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and shaking metal. "We need to get below the ionosphere." Once we hit the lower layers, we can shake them off. Lieutenant Cade's voice came through, grim yet steady. The Xalari are keeping pace. They're anticipating our every move. The gravity well is our only advantage, but it's not enough. The ship trembled again, a second barrage of fire from the Xalari warship grazing their shields, causing them to flare wildly. The force sent several crew members tumbling across the bridge, but Ilara remained rooted in her seat, eyes locked on the readings. "Just a little further," she muttered, barely audible to herself. As they plunged deeper, the Valiant began to catch the upper stratosphere. The ship's hull groaned in protest as the atmospheric pressure intensified, buffeting the ship with violent turbulence. The Xalari warship, following too closely, struggled to match the Valiant's velocity. Their fighters were less nimble, slowing as they entered the denser layers of the atmosphere, their engines sputtering. "We're almost there," Cade shouted. "They can't follow us much longer." Ilara's mind raced as she calculated their next move. The gravity well had given them a temporary edge, but they couldn't afford to keep running. Not with the Valiant so heavily damaged. "We need to turn this around," she said, her voice low and sharp. "We can't just survive this. We have to end it." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. For a moment, the crew shared the same thought. They were out of options. The Valiant had taken a brutal beating, and even their shield systems were starting to fail. But in the eyes of every crew member, something shifted. A spark of defiance ignited, a belief that they could do more than just survive. "Prepare to engage the reverse thrusters," Ilara ordered, her voice resolute. "We're going to put them in our sights. Every last one of those fighters will pay for underestimating us." Cade looked up, her expression cautious, but there was a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "You want us to fight. I want them to know what happens when you push humanity to the brink," Ilara said, her eyes fierce. "We're not just a colony. We're a species that survived the worst. And now, we're going to show them exactly why that matters." Ilara turned to the tactical display, her fingers tracing the lines of their remaining options. A fierce determination swept over her, and she knew this was the turning point. Either the Valiant and its crew would fall, or they would make history. With a controlled breath, she gave the order. "Launch all missiles. Target the lead fighter group. Now." The Valiant's missiles screamed out into the atmosphere, arcing in a deadly ballet as they locked onto their targets. Ilara's heart beat in time with the countdown. The Valiant's missiles streaked across the sky like a swarm of meteors, their engines glowing as they rocketed toward the Xalari fighters. Ilara's breath hitched as the countdown echoed in her mind. The missile lock-on had been precise, but the Xalari were no fools. They responded instantly, evasive maneuvers flashing on the tactical screen as the enemy ships darted and twisted, attempting to avoid the incoming fire. "Come on," Ilara muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing on the incoming target data. The first missile detonated in a brilliant explosion, taking out 2 fighters in a single strike, but the remaining enemy ships broke formation and scattered. A few smaller craft were still within range, but the rest quickly ascended into higher altitudes, firing back with intense bursts of energy. "Shields are down to 30%, Cade reported, her voice taut with anxiety. "We can't keep this up much longer." Ilara gritted her teeth. The Valiant had done some damage, but they were far from out of danger. They couldn't afford to run anymore. They had to fight. The Xalari mothership loomed in the distance, a silent specter of death that could wipe them out in a matter of seconds. "Seraph, run a full diagnostic on our weapon systems," Ilara ordered, her fingers flying across the console. "I need something more. Anything we have left." "Weapon systems at 75% efficiency," Seraph responded, its calm voice providing little comfort. "Point defense turrets remain operational. A full missile salvo is possible, though it may only disable enemy fighters, not the mothership." Ilara's mind wavered. The mothership was still too far to engage directly, but those fighters, they could be dealt with. And if they couldn't take them out now, they'd be facing wave after wave. Helm, give me a vector toward the remaining fighter group. We're going to hit them hard and fast, Ilara ordered, her tone sharp and unwavering. The Valiant veered, throwing the crew sideways as the ship shot toward the swirling cluster of Salari fighters. Another salvo of energy blasts tore across the ship's shields, but this time, Ilara was ready. The point defense turrets whined and hummed as they fired, taking down 2 more of the Salari ships in quick succession. Direct hit. 1 fighter group neutralized, Cade shouted, a spark of triumph in her voice. But the victory was short-lived. A rumble shook the Valiant as a larger energy blast grazed the port side of the ship. The shields were buckling under the constant pressure. Ilara could feel the weight of their situation pressing down harder with each passing second. They couldn't last much longer. "Commander," Cade said, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "The mothership, it's charging its main weapon again." Ilara's eyes flicked toward the tactical display. The Salari flagship's central cannon was powering up. If they didn't do something now, the Valiant would be reduced to space debris. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Full speed," Ilara ordered. "We have one shot at this." The Valiant lurched as the engines roared to life, the ship darting toward the chaos of the atmosphere below. As the crew braced for impact, Ilara clenched her fists, her mind set on one singular goal: survival. "Whatever it takes," she muttered. "We make them pay." The Valiant plunged deeper into the swirling atmosphere of the moon, the ship's hull shaking with every violent gust of wind as it descended toward the planet's surface. Ilara's mind raced as she plotted their course. The Salari mothership's main weapon was charging, its energy rippling through the atmosphere like a storm on the horizon, ready to obliterate them in a single decisive blast. Time was running out, and the Valiant's damage was mounting. "Commander, the Salari ship is closing fast," Cade called out, her voice strained. "They're within range to fire the main cannon." Ilara's heart pounded in her chest. The Valiant's shields were barely holding, and their evasive maneuvers were becoming more desperate with every passing second. There was no way they could outrun the mothership at this point. They were running out of space, out of time. "Full power to aft thrusters," Ilara ordered. "We need to angle the ship just right. Get us beneath the edge of that canyon. Use the terrain to our advantage." The ship's engines roared to life as the crew scrambled to adjust the Valiant's course, steering them toward a jagged, rocky gorge that cut through the moon's surface like a scar. The Salari fighters were still on their tail, but their shots were less precise now, slowed by the thicker atmosphere and the maze of rocky formations. "Hold on, everyone," Ilara shouted as the Valiant threaded through the canyon, barely avoiding a massive rock formation that loomed in their path. The ship's hull scraped the edge of one boulder, sending a jolt through the crew, but they kept moving, faster, harder, as if the very ground beneath them was trying to crush them. Behind them, the Salari mothership loomed ever closer, but its vast size worked against it. The mothership's weapon systems were too bulky to adapt to the tight turns the Valiant was making, and the smaller Salari fighters struggled to keep up in the treacherous canyon. The mothership fired, its main cannon roaring to life. A beam of pure, concentrated energy shot forward, illuminating the dark canyon walls with blinding light. "Get us down," Ilara screamed, pushing the console harder. The Valiant's engines roared as the ship dove lower, skimming the canyon floor. The energy beam missed by mere meters, grazing the top of the canyon and splitting the rock in a shower of debris. "That was too close," Cade gasped. Ilara's heart was still racing, but there was no time to dwell on their near miss. The canyon had given them a momentary advantage, but the Salari mothership wasn't going to stop. It was adapting, adjusting, and soon it would catch up. The sound of the ship's hull cracking under pressure filled the bridge. The Valiant was nearing the edge. They couldn't keep running forever. "Seraph," Ilara said, her voice cold, "is there any way we can get a direct hit on their main cannon?" There was a long pause before Seraph responded, its calm voice cutting through the tension. "Yes, Commander. A direct hit would require targeting the weak point in the cannon's energy chamber. The angle must be precise." Ilara's eyes narrowed. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing in on her. The odds were impossible, but this was their one chance. "We're not running anymore," Ilara declared. "It's time to end this." The Valiant tore through the canyon, its hull battered, shields flickering as if they might fail any moment. The jagged rock formations flew by in a blur as Ilara kept her focus on the twisting path ahead. The Salary mothership was still in pursuit, its massive form dwarfing the canyon walls. It fired again, but this time Ilara was ready. "Brace," she shouted as another beam of energy surged toward them. The ship swerved violently, skimming just inches above the canyon floor. The blast missed, but the shockwave sent debris scattering in all directions, some of it hitting the Valiant's shields. "Shields at 15%, Cade reported, her voice tight with stress. "We can't take another hit like that." "We don't have time for another hit," Ilara snapped, her voice razor-sharp. "We've got one shot, and it's now or never. Target the weak point in the cannon, Seraph. I want that main gun offline." Calculating the optimal trajectory, Seraph responded, its mechanical calm cutting through the tension. "Analysis suggests a direct hit is possible if the angle is correct. However, the probability of success is low." Ilara's gaze hardened. "I don't need probability. I need results." The canyon walls were narrowing, and they were running out of time. If they didn't make their move now, they would be crushed. Ilara's fingers hovered over the controls, guiding the ship's evasive path while simultaneously aiming for the Salary mothership's weak point. The main cannon was at the center of its massive frame, an ancient weapon designed to obliterate entire fleets. If they could destroy it, the mothership would be crippled, and without it, the Tatalari would lose their edge. "Hold steady." Ilara gritted her teeth, sweat trickling down her forehead as the ship hurtled through the canyon. "Directly in line," Cade confirmed, her voice taut with anticipation. "Ready to fire." "Fire now," Ilara commanded. The Valiant's remaining missile systems roared to life, sending a concentrated burst of energy toward the Salary mothership. The projectile arced through the air, a perfect streak of light in the dimness of the canyon. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Then, a deafening explosion rocked the Valiant, sending shockwaves through the ship. The missile collided directly with the main cannon of the mothership, the explosion sending a cascade of fiery debris outward. The Salary flagship groaned as its massive weapon systems went dark, energy pulsing erratically through the ship's hull. "Target destroyed," Seraph reported, its voice filled with the strange, mechanical satisfaction of a job well done. Ilara allowed herself a brief breath of relief, but it was short-lived. The mothership was not destroyed, only weakened, and its fighters, though diminished, were still a threat. "Not over yet," Ilara muttered, her voice steady as she turned to her crew. "Finish them off. All systems, prepare for full combat mode." Cade's face was grim, but determination shone through. "Aye, Commander. Let's end this." The Valiant's weapon systems hummed to life again, and the final wave of Salary fighters, still scattered but dangerous, dove toward them. Ilara's fingers danced over the console, commanding the point defense turrets and launching the last of their missiles. Each shot was a message that humanity would not be cowed, would not be crushed under the weight of ancient power. As the final enemy ship detonated in a brilliant burst of energy, Ilara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The battle was won. For now. The Valiant was battered, its hull scarred, but it had survived. And in that survival was the spark of something greater, the understanding that humanity had just taken its first step into a new era. "Good work, everyone," Ilara said, her voice hoarse but full of pride. "We've just made history."